Pray before you choose. Father of light who sees beyond the edges of our understanding, we come quietly before you with minds full of questions and hearts standing at crossroads we did not expect, carrying decisions that feel heavier than our words and paths that seem to divide beneath our feet. And you know how easily we confuse urgency with wisdom and noise with direction, yet you remain steady, inviting us into a deeper listening where truth is not rushed and clarity is born in stillness. For you are the source of all wisdom that shapes life rightly and orders our steps with purpose. And even when our thoughts scatter and our certainty fades, your understanding remains whole and unshaken, reaching further than our sight and deeper than our reasoning, teaching us that wisdom is not found in control, but in reverence, not in haste, but in humility. And here in this sacred pause, we admit how often we have leaned on our own insight and felt its limits. So we draw near with open hands and willing hearts, trusting that you delight in guiding those who seek you sincerely. And if your heart feels unsure of which way to turn right now, let it gently lean toward God and listen for His quiet leading as we remain here together before Him, breathing in the promise that wisdom given by you is generous, patient, and shaped by love. God of ancient paths and living truth, as we remain before you, we feel the tension between what we want and what we need, between the voice of our desires and the whisper of your counsel. And you know how easily our hearts chase what glitters for a moment while missing what endures. Yet you speak through wisdom that has been tested by time, reminding us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding and the doorway to a life that bears good fruit. And you gently turn our attention from shortcuts that promise ease but lead to emptiness, toward ways that may seem slower, yet are rich with meaning, shaping character as much as outcome. And in this holy unfolding, we sense that true guidance is not merely about choosing the right step, but about becoming the kind of person who walks humbly with you, learning discernment through trust and patience. And as we sit with this truth, our restless striving begins to soften, replaced by a desire to be taught rather than to rush ahead. So if your soul feels pulled by many options and voices right now, allow it to quiet itself before God and ask for a heart that loves wisdom more than convenience as we continue resting in His presence. Wise and gentle Lord, as this prayer continues to unfold, we become aware of how often we have asked you to bless our plans instead of asking you to shape them, carrying our own conclusions to your feet rather than waiting for your counsel. And yet you meet us without reproach, faithful to the promise that when we ask for wisdom, you give it generously, not shaming our uncertainty, but honoring our humility. And you teach us that discernment grows in those who listen more than they speak, and who pause long enough to notice the quiet movements of your Spirit, guiding us away from harm and toward life. And in this awareness, we begin to see how wisdom is woven into obedience, how understanding deepens when we trust your ways even before they fully make sense to us. And our hearts learn that guidance is not always dramatic or immediate, but often gentle and steady, unfolding step by step. So if you sense a longing for clearer direction right now, let your heart whisper its need to God and remain open to the subtle ways He loves to lead as we stay here in His light. Patient Father, whose wisdom stands beyond the reach of our questions, we stay with you and feel how often confusion arises not from lack of options, but from lack of clarity within our own hearts. And you know how suffering, delay, and unanswered prayers can cloud our understanding, just as Job once stood before the mystery of pain without explanation. Yet you revealed that your wisdom is not diminished by what we cannot explain, nor threatened by what we do not understand. And you gently remind us that there are depths of purpose at work beyond our sight, truths that cannot be measured by comfort alone. And in this realization, our demand for simple answers begins to soften into reverence, teaching us that wisdom sometimes means trusting you even when the path feels hidden, even when the reason remains unspoken. And we sense that your guidance is not absent in silence, but often present within it, shaping endurance, humility, and hope beneath the surface of our lives. So if your heart is carrying questions that feel too heavy or unfair right now, allow it to rest before God without explanation, trusting that His wisdom is still holding you even here as we remain quietly before Him. Eternal God who weighs the hearts of all creation, as we linger in this sacred space, we begin to notice how often we measure wisdom by outcomes while you measure it by faithfulness. and you know how easily we grow weary when effort does not seem to bring immediate reward, echoing the reflections of those who have searched for meaning under the sun and found so much of it fleeting and fragile. Yet you gently teach us that wisdom is not found in grasping at permanence where it does not exist, but in anchoring our lives to you who alone remain constant. And in this quiet reckoning, our striving loosens its grip as we learn to release the illusion that we must make everything last, discovering instead the peace of living rightly within each passing moment, honoring you with reverence and obedience even when results feel small or unseen. And this perspective reshapes our days with humility and purpose. So if your heart feels tired from chasing what never fully satisfies, let it pause now and turn toward God, allowing Him to redefine what truly matters as we continue resting in His presence. Faithful teacher of our wandering hearts, as we remain before you, we sense how wisdom gently calls to us in ordinary moments, in choices that seem small yet quietly shape the direction of our lives. And you remind us through ancient words that the path of the wise is often marked by restraint, patience, and truth spoken with care, while folly rushes ahead without listening. And in this contrast, we recognize how often we have hurried past your guidance in the name of progress, only to feel the weight of those choices later. Yet you do not abandon us there, but invite us to learn again, to be corrected without shame and redirected without fear. For wisdom grows where humility is welcomed. And as we open ourselves to this teaching, our hearts begin to value discernment more than applause and integrity more than ease, trusting that what is sown in righteousness will bear fruit in its time. So if your spirit feels ready to learn rather than to prove right now, let it quietly bow before God and receive His instruction as a gift while we continue in this gentle prayer. Faithful teacher of our wandering hearts, as we remain before you, we sense how wisdom gently calls to us in ordinary moments, in choices that seem small yet quietly shape the direction of our lives. And you remind us through ancient words that the path of the wise is often marked by restraint, patience, and truth spoken with care, while folly rushes ahead without listening. And in this contrast, we recognize how often we have hurried past your guidance in the name of progress, only to feel the weight of those choices later. Yet you do not abandon us there, but invite us to learn again, to be corrected without shame and redirected without fear. For wisdom grows where humility is welcomed. And as we open ourselves to this teaching, our hearts begin to value discernment more than applause and integrity more than ease, trusting that what is sown in righteousness will bear fruit in its time. So if your spirit feels ready to learn rather than to prove right now, let it quietly bow before God and receive His instruction as a gift while we continue in this gentle prayer. Lord of truth who delights in honest hearts, as this prayer flows onward, we become aware of how often our words run ahead of our understanding, how quickly we speak and decide while your wisdom invites us to listen first, to slow the rhythm of our reactions so that discernment can take root. And you remind us through gentle instruction that wisdom is revealed in patience, in a listening spirit that values understanding more than being heard. And as we sit with this awareness, we feel how much noise has filled our inner world, crowding out the quiet guidance you long to offer. Yet you do not withdraw from us in our haste, but wait with kindness for our attention, ready to shape our responses with grace and clarity. And in this waiting, we learn that wisdom is not passive but attentive, not silent from fear but silent from trust, creating space for truth to surface without force. And as our hearts begin to settle, we sense how clarity often follows calm. So if your mind feels overwhelmed by too many voices right now, let it gently grow still before God and choose to listen for His wisdom as we remain together in this quiet devotion. Giver of insight who sees the end from the beginning, we stay present with you and feel how deeply we long for certainty, for clear signs and immediate answers. Yet you often lead us by inviting trust rather than providing full explanations, teaching us that wisdom walks by faith and not by sight. And you remind us that discernment grows as we learn to take each step with you instead of demanding to see the entire road at once. And in this unfolding trust, our fear of making the wrong choice begins to loosen, replaced by confidence that you are able to guide even imperfect steps toward good ends. And we sense that your wisdom is not fragile or easily disrupted by our humanity, but strong enough to work through it, shaping our lives through grace as much as through clarity. And as this truth settles, we feel invited to move forward without paralysis, trusting your nearness more than our certainty. So if your heart feels afraid of choosing wrongly right now, allow it to quietly trust God with the next small step, believing that His wisdom will meet you there as we remain in His gentle presence. Holy God, whose understanding cannot be searched out, as we remain within this prayer, we feel how suffering has a way of humbling our confidence and exposing the limits of what we think we know. And you see how pain can make us question your ways just as it once did for those who cried out in confusion and sorrow. Yet through that wrestling, you revealed that wisdom is not always an answer to be solved, but a presence to be trusted. And you invite us to lay down our demand to comprehend everything, and instead rest in the truth that you are wise even when life feels unfair. And in this surrender, something within us softens, allowing reverence to take the place of resistance and trust to replace accusation. And we sense that your guidance often comes not by explaining the storm, but by standing with us within it, steady and unchanging. And as we accept this mystery, our hearts find a deeper peace that does not depend on circumstances. So if your soul is carrying pain that has made wisdom feel distant right now, let it gently rest before God and trust His unfathomable understanding to hold you as we continue together. Faithful Lord, who searches the depths of our intentions, as we stay with you, we begin to see how wisdom is shaped not only by what we choose, but by why we choose it. And you know how easily our motives become tangled with fear, pride, or the need for approval. Yet you lovingly draw us back to a purer place, where decisions are formed in honesty before you, reminding us through quiet truth that a wise heart is one that seeks integrity, even when no one else is watching. And as this awareness grows, we sense how your guidance refines us from the inside out, aligning desire with truth and action with love, teaching us that wisdom is not merely knowing the right thing, but loving the right thing deeply enough to live it. And this inward shaping feels both gentle and profound, like light slowly filling a room that once held shadows, and we realize that you care just as much about who we are becoming as where we are going. So if your heart feels uncertain about its own intentions right now, let it open honestly before God and invite Him to shape your motives with His wisdom as we remain quietly in His presence. Source of all true counsel, as we continue in this gentle devotion, we sense how your wisdom often arrives clothed in Scripture that has carried generations through uncertainty, words that do not rush us but reshape us. And you remind us through the Psalms that understanding grows in those who meditate on your ways, who allow your truth to dwell richly within them until it begins to guide instinct as much as thought. And we feel how our inner world is slowly being reordered as your wisdom replaces confusion with direction and anxiety with discernment, teaching us that guidance is not always a sudden revelation, but a steady forming of the heart. And as we remain open to this shaping, we notice how our reactions soften and our choices gain clarity, because your word becomes a lamp not only for the path ahead, but for the posture of our steps along the way. And this quiet illumination gives us confidence to move forward without rushing or retreating, trusting that your truth is sufficient for each moment. So if your heart longs to understand God's ways more deeply right now, let it rest with His words, and allow them to gently guide your thoughts as we stay here together before Him. Gentle shepherd of discerning hearts, as this prayer carries on, we become aware of how wisdom often protects us before it directs us, guarding our steps from paths that promise much yet lead to harm. And you know how easily we mistake boldness for courage or impulse for faith, yet you patiently teach us that wise guidance often whispers restraint, inviting us to pause where haste would wound us. And in this protective care, we feel your love shaping our decisions with foresight and mercy, reminding us that a prudent heart considers the way before walking it. And as we receive this truth, our fear of missing out begins to fade, replaced by trust that what you withhold is as loving as what you provide. And we sense that your wisdom is not meant to confine us, but to keep us whole, preserving joy, peace, and integrity along the journey. And this realization brings relief to our striving souls. So if your heart feels pressured to rush into something uncertain right now, let it gently pause before God and ask for the discernment that guards life as we continue resting in His care. Father of eternal wisdom, as we remain in this sacred moment, we feel how your wisdom is not a distant concept, but a living presence that intertwines with every part of our lives. And you remind us that the greatest wisdom of all is found in knowing you, in walking closely with you, and in trusting your voice above all others. For you are the source of understanding, the wellspring of every good and perfect gift. And we begin to see that all our searching for clarity, all our longing for answers, points us back to the truth that wisdom is a relationship with you, a journey of constant leaning in, learning to trust your leading even when it feels like the road is uncertain. And in this place our hearts are free to let go of the need to control every outcome, trusting that your wisdom is woven into the fabric of our lives, even in the moments we cannot yet comprehend. And as we release our grip on certainty, we sense a deep peace settling within us, knowing that to walk with you is to walk in wisdom. So if your heart feels the weight of decision right now, let it rest in the assurance that God Himself is with you, guiding you as we continue this prayer together. God, who orders seasons and steps with unseen care, as we continue walking within this prayer, we sense how often our anxiety around decisions comes from forgetting that time itself rests in your hands, and you know how we struggle against waiting, fearing that delay means neglect or silence means absence. Yet you teach us through wisdom refined by time that patience is not wasted space but sacred ground where discernment matures. And you show us that many of your answers arrive slowly so they can settle deeply, shaping not only what we choose but how we choose it. And in this slower rhythm, our hearts begin to learn that wisdom is rarely rushed and never careless, unfolding in alignment with your perfect timing rather than our urgency. And we feel relief in knowing that nothing meant for us will pass us by when we walk with you, because your guidance is faithful and precise, never late and never hurried. So if your heart feels restless about waiting for clarity right now, let it gently surrender its timeline to God and trust that His wisdom is already at work as we remain here together before Him. Lord of gentle correction and quiet insight, as we remain attentive to you, we notice how wisdom often grows through counsel, through voices you place around us to reflect your truth when our own perspective narrows, and you know how easily pride convinces us that we must decide alone. Yet you remind us that wise hearts welcome instruction and find safety in humility, allowing guidance to come through community, through shared discernment, through love that speaks honestly and listens well. And in this awareness, we feel our defenses soften, realizing that seeking wisdom is not a sign of weakness, but of trust in how you work through others. And you patiently align our hearts to receive what we might otherwise resist, shaping discernment through connection rather than isolation. And as this truth settles, we feel less burdened by the pressure to know everything ourselves, comforted by the way you surround us with care. So if your heart feels unsure and alone in a decision right now, let it open gently to God and consider who He may be using to guide you as we continue resting in His wisdom. Faithful God who weighs every word and intention, as this prayer continues to breathe, we become aware of how wisdom also teaches us when to speak and when to remain silent, how restraint can be as powerful as action, and you know how quickly we are tempted to fill uncertainty with explanations, opinions, or defenses. Yet you invite us into a quieter strength, where discernment governs our words and patience guards our responses, reminding us that a gentle answer can preserve peace, and a measured tongue can protect what is tender. And in this awareness, we feel how your wisdom is shaping not only our decisions, but our relationships, teaching us to move with grace rather than impulse, with understanding rather than reaction. And as we sit with this truth, our hearts feel steadier, less reactive, more anchored in your calm presence, sensing that wisdom often reveals itself in how we choose to respond under pressure. So if your heart feels stirred or provoked right now, let it pause before God and ask for the wisdom that knows when to speak life and when to wait in silence as we remain together in His presence. Abba Father, wisdom beyond measure and love without end. As we arrive at this deepest place of prayer, we feel how your guidance has been quietly shaping us, not by removing every uncertainty, but by anchoring our hearts in you. And you remind us now that true wisdom is not the absence of questions, but the presence of trust, not the mastery of life, but the surrender of it into your faithful hands. And we sense how all our searching, choosing, waiting, and listening finds its rest in reverence for you. For you are the beginning and the fulfillment of understanding. And here we recognize that to fear you is not to shrink back, but to stand in awe of a God whose ways are higher and whose care is personal. And as this truth settles, we feel a gentle courage rising, steady and unforced, ready to walk forward with discernment shaped by love. So if your heart desires to walk wisely from this moment on, let it quietly offer itself to God and receive His leading with humility and trust. And now may the Lord bless you with wisdom that is pure and peaceable. May He guide your steps with clarity and patience. May His understanding guard your heart when answers feel distant. And may you walk in the gentle confidence of one who is led by God, held by His grace, and sustained by His unfailing love, now and always. And if this prayer has found you where you are, if these words have gently guided your heart or brought even a small measure of peace, let this moment extend beyond you by offering a simple gesture of love, allowing a like and a share to carry this prayer to someone who may be searching for wisdom and direction right now. And feel free to leave a word or a quiet request in the comments so we can walk together in faith, trusting that God uses even small acts to bring light, guidance, and hope to many hearts.